No, good morning as always. Again, glad to see y'all. I'm really excited today. We are closing out the book of Revelation. So if you got our text, somehow this Sunday's text and next Sunday's got flip-flopped. So we are not studying or starting a new series yet. We are finishing out Revelation. We're going to be in Revelation chapter 21. But I do need to catch you up because if you are like me and life is crazy, this may be your first time and you're going, oh, I'm coming in at the end of a book. Or it may be that you've missed a series here or there or a sermon, and we just want to make sure we understand what's happening. So if I can summarize our study over the last 8 weeks in 2 minutes or less, here's what we would say. The book of Revelation is what's called ancient Near East apocalyptic literature. If I've lost you already, you're not alone. It's a dead genre. It's like picking up poetry for the first time in your life, but imagine that Americans haven't written poetry in 400 years. Right now, except for we go back to 2,000 years. To understand this, though, to make it really simple, here's what we would say. The book is a series of visions that tell a story. In these stories, they interplay with each other, and they're what we call recapitulatory. Recapitulatory simply means this. They're going to recap the same theological points over and over and over. So with that said, here's where we're at over the last 30 seconds. We said Jesus is coming back. This was week 1. Be ready. We said that as he comes back, we're to persevere. We're to look forward with hope. We're to recognize there will be suffering. That was week 2. Week 3, we jumped into the throne room of God, and we said that you and I, we were created to aim our life at something, and that something is God. That when we aim our life at good things, but it's not God, it ultimately falls short. We were made to orient ourselves towards God. In week 4, we said there's these problems in the world, and when God comes back, these problems have to be dealt with. These were the seals and the trumpets. In week 5, we said this is the gospel story on display, that God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, and that whoever shall believe, right, shall not perish, but have everlasting life. We said this is the core of Revelation, that the hope you and I have is the same hope the early church had, the same hope Jesus preached. In week 6, we jumped into the dragons and the battles that were happening. And we said one of the things we have to deal with while we wait is that there are going to be powerhouses in our life. Some of these powerhouses are political and they're corrupt and they can be devastating to the world. And some of these powerhouses are religious and they can be corrupt and they can be devastating to the world. And that you and I will walk in this going, I don't know how to make sense of the powers of the world that are breaking things and how it seems like the worst people end up with the most authority in life. Whether that's in my HOA, right, or whether it's in my work or whatever it is, this tends to be just the one who says, I will sacrifice whatever it takes to get what I want is the one who gets it, even at the cost of everything else. And Doug preached that week, and he simply said that you and I aim at the bigger task, the bigger goal. We submit to the bigger God. Not the God of politics, not the God of religion, but the God of all gods. And then last week we said, hey, let's zoom in on the fall of Babylon, and here's what it means. It says that even though we want to say that when God comes back and sets all things right, we want to think of this as an outside thing. We want to go, look, there are systems that need to be torn down. There are, machines in the world, and there are businesses, and there are these things that they do no good. They need to be dealt with. But one of the problems that Babylon brings forward is that it's in the heart of man that the real change has to take place. And we looked at the idea that the fall of Babylon was mourned by people. And we said, this is the beauty of the gospel, is he doesn't come in and go, I'm going to fix the problems of your life, John. He goes, I'm going to shape you to be made into my image in such a way that you can survive this world and eventually step into eternity with me. And now this week, we're going to ask this big question. We're going to ask the question, what is heaven? Because I think ultimately when we talk about heaven I often find that we have let Hollywood dictate my understanding of heaven more than scriptural thinking. And I've shared this story, but when I grew up, I actually did not want to go to heaven when I was really young. Like I knew I was supposed to, but my understanding of heaven was that I was going to sit on a cloud, like, Tom and Jerry, and I was going to play a harp, and I was going to be eternally bored because harp music is horrible by today's standards, and surely there is something better to do than to simply sing a song for eternity. And it wasn't until I began to actually understand and really look into what heaven is that my joy for heaven grew. And so I want to start with this question because I want to know, do we as a people who are supposed to long for and hope for something ahead of us, do we really understand where it is that we are aiming our life, where it is we're really placing our hope? Can I really get excited about heaven? Am I excited about streets of gold? If you work in construction, you may have heard that line before, and your first thought is, gold makes a horrible concrete. Why would we make streets out of gold? Is there something more than just the wealth of heaven? Like, what is it that really makes my heart beat? And is this just a John thing, or is this a people thing? So stick with me as we go through this. We're going to read through the first 8 verses. We're going to pull out some points, and I want to see if we can understand why heaven is so hard for us to imagine, and then what we can say about heaven. So here we go. This is verses 1 through 5. And then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the sea, the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw a holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be theirs, or with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. For the former things have passed away." And he who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." It's a peculiar first line. Like, there's a lot of really cool things in there. No more death sounds awesome. Being made new sounds great. Like, there's biblical theology to this, but no more sea is a really fascinating phrase. And this is interesting to me, and this is really important because when I hear sea, a lot of people go, does this mean like the ocean is gone? And I would have you just pause for a moment so we can set this up. God created the ocean in Genesis, and he calls it good. This is probably not about a literal ocean. In fact, 4 times, Genesis 4, 10, 15, and I think right before this, in 20, the ocean is tied to sin and chaos. This is the glass sea in the throne room of God. This is where we see Babylon fight and fall. The ocean, or the sea in this case, it's not about physical water. It's about saying, what would heaven be like if sin was no more? Chaos was no more. And I want us to pause on this because I think in this lies the problem. I don't know how to imagine heaven without John still being John and a product of this sinful world. So maybe the best way I can explain this and the problem at hand is, some of you know I take medication for my thyroid. I have hypothyroidism, and I was diagnosed with Graves' disease about a year after my marriage, so 2010, 2011. And that's not because I don't remember my marriage date, it's because I don't remember the date I was diagnosed. Just love you. But something interesting happened. My wife is a medical professional, I'm not. And so for me, we got married, and all of a sudden, like, I was just sleeping and tired. I would sit down, and my body was like, sleep. And then I would eat, and sometimes, like, I was trying to get big at the time and really lift weights, and I would eat like 10 eggs, and like 20 minutes later, my stomach would be like, eat. Like, no matter how much I ate, no matter how much I slept, it just seemed like my body was fighting me to eat more and to sleep more. And me, being a young man, was like, well, yeah, I'm hitting the gym for like 3 hours. I'm doing a lot of school work, and I work hard. I'm tired and I'm hungry. My wife, who's much smarter than me on this, just looked at me and goes, something's wrong with you. Go to the doctor. So we went to the doctor. He was a real young man, really kind, but it was his first time interacting with something wrong with someone's thyroid. And the reason this is important is he called me and he felt my throat. He looked at me and he goes, do you feel more tired than you should? And I sat back and I thought, and I said, I don't know. All I know is how tired I feel, but I don't know if this is more tired than I should feel. Like, my whole frame of reference is, I don't have energy. And I bring this up because when I said I don't know, it hit him, and he goes, oh, you're right. Like, you don't have a metric for what a healthy thyroid feels like right now in your life. You just know you're going to school, you know you and your wife are doing well, like things are kind of building. Here's what happened that struck me, though. They diagnosed me with Graves' disease. Whole different story, scared me because Graves does not mean dying. It is named after Dr. Graves, and thankfully that explained that to me on that phone call. But the whole premise of this was I took medication. He called me back in. He goes, how you feeling? And I was like, amazing. Like, I feel like I can run again, and I feel like I have energy again, and I can move again. Like, I feel amazing. I think we've gotten so used to sin in this world, it's like we're living with that low energy, always hungry appetite. But you and I don't know what it's like to live without that brokenness. So even though the Holy Spirit moves us towards holiness, even though we have this call and God is at work, the world is broken and warped. This is the fall in Genesis 3, right? And you and I have grown up in this. So one of the problems with heaven is that we look at heaven and we go, man, what's it going to be like? And you and I go, all I have is the brokenness of this world. And I can tell you I'm tired, I don't like that, and I eat too much, I don't like that. But we don't have a framework to say, man, this is how good this is going to be. And I just want to pause on that to go, I think once the medicine is taken, like once we see Christ come, you and I are going to go, oh my goodness, I was tired and hungry. Like I feel amazing now. I love the idea that heaven is beyond our ability to understand and imagine. Because I think if I could imagine it, I don't think it would really be heaven. We're talking about a creation of the infinite divine in the beauty he promises, not the beauty that I can make out in a dream, in a moment, or an idea. But it creates a problem because when we go now to talk about heaven, here's what I'll say. We talk about streets of gold. We talk about, I'm going to get my mansion, my big house. I'm going to get my reward for being faithful. And I'm going to put that to the side for now. I think there's an issue there for us. But we talk about it with the brokenness of this world in mind because somehow we think the ambition of my heart here will be the same as my ambition in heaven. So stick with me on that. Hold that idea in your head. That's the heaviest we're going to get. I promise. Let's keep going though. This is verse 3 and you're going to see this. It says, and I heard a loud voice from the throne room saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. One of the biggest misconceptions I see all the time now is we go, God can't be around sin. Can we just say that's not a biblical idea? We make a logical fallacy here. Sin can't be around God. That does not mean God can't be around sin. Jesus walked this world. He took on the sin of the world on the cross. And the reason I point this out, the reason this is a big deal is we get over and over and over in the Old Testament. I mean, in the book of Exodus, I will be your God, you will be my people. I will dwell among you. The promise is, he goes, I'm coming to live in the house and I'm bringing everything with me. But what happened when Moses wanted to see God? If you see me, you will surely die. What happened when Isaiah stood in the throne room and he caught the glimpse of where God walked by? He goes, woe is me, I'm coming undone. The Hebrew is here is unraveling. Like literally the molecules are breaking apart. What happens when sinful man sees the glory of a perfect God? It can't survive. And this brings us back to Babylon just for a moment because I want us to understand this, that God will come and he will dwell with man. There's our big point. But this requires certain things to take place. Because without the right fixes, without the right growth, without the right maturity, we won't be fit for eternity before us. We won't be fit for the perfect God. Not because he disdains our brokenness, not because he can't be around us, but for us to live in the fullness of joy, we have to become part of the family in a way that works with the family. And so I want us to understand, again, when we talk about God's wrath, when we see these things, when we see the anger of God, it's not let me shake my fist at you and punish you endlessly and ruthlessly for no problem or no reason. It is for you to come into my household, into my kingdom. Here are the family rules, and I need you to be able to walk in them. Here's what it looks like to participate in the joy of my house. So the first two things we get about heaven is it's beyond my imagination because my imagination is still fallen and broken. The second thing we get is it's not predicated probably off a location. Like I'm going to heaven one day, but it's predicated off the place where God will dwell. Maybe we would say this better. It's not that God lives in heaven, it's that heaven is the outpouring of the person of God. And where God goes, heaven comes. And that's such a beautiful concept. And it's going to be a big deal when we see heaven descend on earth, which is exactly where we're moving towards. But we're in this real interesting place. This is what the final section says of these 5 verses. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. One part of this I think is simple and beautiful, but I want to take you to a conversation I had with a young man, actually a much older man than me about this. It was very cool and interesting passage. He goes, John, I'm a huge sports fan. I think I'm going to be bored to death in heaven because sports are going to be horrible. And I said, unpack that please for me. He said, well, we're going to be perfect. There's no more sorrow. There's no more pain. I feel the pain. Baylor lost by 21 points last night. It was devastating. LSU lost by like 21 points. It was devastating. If you're an A&M fan, just be quiet, right? Like we feel the pain of the tribes we carry. And he goes, if there's no more pain, like it's just going to be boring. Tom Brady's going to drop back if Tom Brady's there, and he's going to throw a dime to a receiver who catches it perfectly. Competition has entertainment built into it. If we're perfect, there's no room for growth. There's no room for challenges. You'll pick up an instrument and you'll play any song you want to. I said, I don't think you understand heaven very well, honestly. I don't think you understand perfection very well. You see, the God we move towards is an infinite God. Perfection is defined by God. So if God is infinite, and this again, I'm sorry, we are getting deep into this for a second, hyperlogical here. If God is infinite, the pursuit of perfection is infinite. I said, what if football isn't boring because Tom Brady throws a laser and his receiver catches it? I said, what if football is the best game you've ever seen because that receiver is playing better than he's ever played, and that cornerback who's guarding him is playing better than he's ever played, and that quarterback is playing better than they've ever played? What if the things we enjoy of this world are meant to be enjoyed in perfection in heaven? Heaven does not diminish the good things of this world. It brings them to the fullness of where they were meant to be. It gets rid of the mistakes and the perversions and the twist, the brokenness from Genesis. And I said, I fully believe that heaven is going to be, after looking at this and studying it and reading historically on it, that heaven is going to have all kind of wonderful things that we get to do and participate in. But I have no ability to sing. And when I raise my voice unto heaven, I think my singing voice is imperfect because I have a broken lens. And I think a perfect singing voice is the one that wins the Grammy. But God goes, John, the perfect singing voice is the one that worships me fully. And then he adds to that, and if you want to get better at singing, you want a perfect singing voice on that level, you have eternity to grow in that skill, always being better at what you're doing. Maybe I'd pause on it this way, and I would say, and we're going to come back to this moment, but we have these deep desires in our heart. You see, we talk about wanting streets of gold, and we talk about wanting to go to heaven, and we talk about wanting this mansion or wanting this recognition, but there are deeper desires in the human heart. One of those deeper desires is that you and I would have a quest, something worth aiming our life at deeply. And I don't mean the grand scheme of like, I just want to worship the Lord. I mean, you have a gifting, you have a passion, you have something that you go, I wake up wanting to do this. In heaven, in that moment, is the ability to pursue that quest in the glory of God because he gave you that quest. And I want you to understand that because when we look at this now, heaven isn't John sitting with Tom and Jerry on a cloud playing a harp. Heaven is God going, John, I gave you these giftings and I'm fixing the passions of your heart and I'm setting all things right. And as I do, the things that bring you life, the things I created, you're going to step into them fully. And when you do, it's going to fill you because only I can fill you. Now, this is a vessel for that. And when you do, you're going to step in it in such a way that you don't walk away shaking your head going, man, I just can't get this right. You're going to walk in going, man, I'm growing in this thing. And my love for God is growing. And my ability to understand his glory is growing. I'll take you back to the fall just to drive this home. Is work a result of the fall, or was it already a predestined design before the fall? Does anybody know? Designed. In fact, what happens when we fall? Work is made harder. I'm going to push something and then leave it alone just to give you a brain teaser. Is the pain of childbirth pre-fall or a result of the fall? You can go wrestle with that later. Right now, all I want to point in this moment is it says things are broken and changed and adopted because of the fall. Right? It's adapted to this weird thing. You and I don't have the ability to see what it was actually supposed to be like. And so part of me looks at this and I go, It's not that I'm going to walk out and go, I really like football. I have 2 herniated discs. I can't play anything to save my life these days. It's not like I'm going to get to heaven and be like, all right, Jesus, I missed my chance. Let's go throw a touchdown, right? It's, if I love this sport, I get to enjoy that sport at its fullest, and I get to grow in that sport with a properly aligned heart. But I want to understand this idea that there's a purpose in heaven and there's work in heaven and that we're getting rid of the brokenness that followed. So stick with me as we jump into the next few verses. This is verse 5 through 8. He who was seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give from the spring of water of life without payment. And the one who conquers will have the heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, the murderers, the sexual immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and the liars, their portion will be the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. It's interesting. He says again, I'm making all things new. And we talked about this, that the newness of creation is not just that trees are new and the earth is new. I mean, I'll use my one C.S. Lewis quote this sermon, but he would say, the grass is grassier. The sky is more skyish. The way he tried to unpack this idea that's almost unimaginable is you would look at everything and go, that's what that's supposed to be. My favorite way of understanding this is when I'm talking and my wife walks in the room and the light hits her just right, or she does something incredible and I go, that's my wife. It's like that moment she seems more Micah, like more my wife than the other times. Like it's a glimpse of her in a whole new way. He goes, this is what all of the new creation's going to be like. But he brings me back now to this idea that I think of that as an external thing. And here, as a new creation in Scripture, we're told that we are a new creation. God says he's going to give us a new mind and a new heart. He's going to write his ways on us. And so the best way that I can kind of unpack this in terms of heaven is that when God creates something new, it creates an utter shift in who we are. My favorite way to see this is that we have a friend named John. His wife, Megan, and him were good friends of ours in Chicago. And Megan told us a story at one point, and she said, my family history is a dark and complicated one. She said, but thank God for the gospel. She said, you see, if you look at my dad, she said, was a pastor. And if you look before him, his dad was a drunkard and was abusive and was broken. And he lived this horrible alcoholic life where alcohol and alcohol abuse ruled his life. And before him, his dad was an alcoholic and set the tone. And before him, his dad, she goes, as far back as we can look in the family tree, up until my dad, every one of these men was an abusive alcoholic. She goes, but something happened. She said, my grandfather came to Christ when my dad was a child. And she said he went in the bathroom that day and he poured out every bottle of alcohol in the house. And she goes, and he never touched another drop the rest of his life. Now, I just want to pause on that as someone who counsels and talks to people about substance abuse and tell you how amazing that is to actually say, I'm cutting this from my life and then do it. But this man, 2 generations ago, looked back over the course of his family's history and said, we've been ruled by sin and brokenness. But today that stops by the glory of God. And in that moment, with the Holy Spirit in him, right, he shifts the trajectory of his family lineage to the point that his son has a redemptive moment, seeing the change in his dad, follows Christ, begins serving in the church, and then his granddaughter, now married to a pastor, good friend of ours, lives a life where she sees the real transformation of the new man. And the reason I bring this back to us is I want to look at heaven to also be practical. And I think if I can summarize to the end in one brief moment, it is this. Why do we wait to live with our eyes aimed towards heaven? Why are we content so often to think of the great heavenly things before us and then bury ourselves in the things in the world today, the concerns? And I want us to begin to live for heaven now so that the joy that is ahead of us becomes something that trickles into here and now. And that doesn't mean that we don't have concerns today. It doesn't mean that we don't do some of these things. It just means that when I triage, when I lay out the things that are important, it is the things of heaven that should be at the top of that list. And that's where I want to take us as we look at this, because this is one of my favorite concepts, but it's something we miss so often. Take a look at it. It says this, verse 6, to the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. Water is a tricky thing in Scripture. It's tied to life. It's tied again to chaos, into sin. It's tied to power. But we also get in the gospel that Jesus is the living water. And I want us to see something deep in this moment, because it's not just water that comes. He says, to those who thirst. And I told you we were going to talk about the deeper things of heaven. And this is it. I want you to catch this. When I look at my life, I go, man, do I want more wealth? I would love a little more money. That'd be nice. That'd deal with a lot of problems. But would I trade whatever money I have for more time with my son before he goes to college? Absolutely. Would I trade whatever success I can have career-wise for more time with my spouse? You see, we recognize in our life that there are deeper things our heart longs for. We long to be loved. It is built within us. I want to be loved, and I want to love someone. I want my work to be meaningful. Right? I don't want to be a drone who sits at a desk all day and does nothing. I want to know that I did something that actually builds up and lasts and impacts the world. I want to feel like God called me to do something great, and that I've begun to pursue that and to move at that my life had purpose and direction. To the thirsty, you and I have a deep desire built within us to quest, to accomplish something, to be remembered, right? Like to be loved and to love. You and I have something deeper in us that drives us than a career. Something deeper in us that drives us more than wealth. If we just stay PG-13, something deeper in us that drives us more than sex. Sorry, Freud. There is something in us that says these things are good, but they are not what's at the heart of what I want and what I pursue. And Scripture says, to the thirsty, to those who long for something deeper, I will give the living water. And now I go back. What is the living water? And Jesus said, I am the living water. He who comes to me will not thirst. He goes, you want purpose in your life? This is what God brings. He brings purpose. You want love in your life? This is what God brings. He brings love into our life. You want a quest? He goes, man, I will bring something for you to pursue. But the thing that drives you, that thing at the core of your being, he goes, I bring that. And to the thirsty, I give it without payment. And this to me is something incredibly gorgeous, because I find myself so distracted by the things of this world that sometimes I begin to paint heaven as a poor caricature of the things of this world, rather than recognizing that heaven is the deep thirst of mankind satisfied in God. And so I go back to streets of gold. And so I go back to this idea of an easy heaven, rather than going, okay, Lord, what really I see in this, what I feel in this, what I know in this, is that you built me with these things in me, these deep desires in me. And if I pursue that desire in and of itself, it will ruin me. But if I come to you, freely do you give these things to me. Let me see if I can unpack this in a way that's easier to understand. If you pursue love, what you'll find yourself doing is having playful sex without any real connection. If you pursue wealth, what you'll do is you'll find yourself eventually at the top of some career ladder, but with no wealth of relationships behind it. You see, the more we pursue the fruit of heaven rather than heaven itself, the more the enemy uses it to twist it and to turn it and to make it something that pulls us away from God rather than overflows from his presence. And so I go back to, there is no more sea. We are trying to operate and we're trying to do something, but we have no good framework for it because we are a product of this world. And I just want to hit this quickly and hard. Jesus gives it, and he gives it without payment. This is the beauty of the gospel. That he finds us in our hard place, in our brokenness. He finds us hopeless. He finds us pursuing things, not being satisfied by them. And he says, I can offer this. And one day when I come, one day when I descend upon this earth, this will overflow from all that I bring. And that's what gets me excited about heaven. That's what gets me fired up. It's one thing to say, man, I've tasted the fruit of the Lord and it is good. It's something else to go, man, we're getting ready for a feast and a banquet. That's what comes my way. The table will be set and it will be more than I can eat. The place will be ready and we will be in awe of the beauty of it. And it is growing infinitely so that our awe and our beauty never fades as we take in the fullness of God. I want us to understand that it may sound cliche, but so often we see this notion that God brings us in. In fact, I'll put it this way. Just take a look at this passage with me. This is the very end of it. He says in verse 6 and 7, to the thirsty, I will give the spring of the water of life without payment. To the one who conquers, he will have this heritage, and I will be the God, he will be his God, and he will be my son. It sounds cliche to say that we get to join the family of God. Now, maybe that has meaningful meat to you, right? You're just like, yes. But for most of us, if you've grown up in the church, you go, okay, I don't really know what to do with this. Quite great, I'm part of the family of God. Or maybe you're newer to the church and you're like, that's really abstract. What does it mean that I'm part of the family of God? And I just want to bring us back to our conversation. What God brings is an adoption into his goodness and his glory and his future. And then he simply says, this is a free gift if you want it. Heaven is the fulfillment of that promise. That my passions, right, they will be filled. My thirst will be quenched. I don't really think I'm going to care much about streets of gold when I'm walking with the Lord daily. I think we aim sometimes at the little fish rather than recognizing the sunset before us or the monstrosity that's on the line. And I want us to understand this because when we talk about heaven, let's not sell it short. Let's not get up there and paint this picture that Hollywood wants where it's like, I'm a good person, so I get wealth. Also, I'm going to be more attractive, and so is my wife. Awesome. And my house is going to be bigger. That's not godly. That is the flesh in me perverting the view of heaven. Let's paint a picture of heaven that says one day I'm going to walk with the being who made us in the fullness of his glory, and the things of my heart, man, they're going to be filled. And the joy that I have, it's going to overtake me. And the beauty of creation is going to shine in ways I've never seen it. And the promise of that is that I'm now fit to be part of that. And I get to walk in this forever. Now, I want to leave you with one challenge, one last thing, because so far everything is future aimed. I want that. I want that bad. What would it look like in our life if we took that mindset and we began to implement it now? That, yes, I want to be able to take care of my family. We need to make some money. But rather than pursuing wealth, I pursued the things of this Lord. Rather than pursuing power, I pursued the things of my Lord. Rather than pursuing prestige or any of the things that drive us in our flesh, I simply said, when I'm going to triage, what I'm going to put at the top of this is the character of God on display in my life and my family's life. That is how we get ready for heaven. We begin to live aiming at heaven now rather than waiting to be caught unprepared when Jesus comes like a thief in the night. This is our challenge. Build up the things of heaven in your life here and now so that we may more readily jump into the things of heaven when they come to us. But man, heaven is going to be glorious, and I'm excited for it. And if it is good and it is true, then those tastes, as they come in, they're going to grow in joy in my life. And I want us to do that together. That's my invitation to you. Get excited, but start aiming at heaven here and now. Pray with me. Father, I thank you. I thank you that in your goodness and in your mercy, you come and you make all things new. I thank you that when you make all things new, that newness, it starts with me in my heart. Because when I look at heaven, if I'm there, the only thing I know right now is that I'm unfit at the moment. But you make us new and ready. And so I ask that this work, this newness, you would continue the work you've begun, that you would be sure to finish it, so that one day I may walk in the fullness of your glory and your joy, and I may know you fully. Give us the courage to aim at heaven now. Give us the wisdom to walk well in your ways. Father, and bless our speech and our life that we may share this heavenly view with those that we meet, and that those that we love may walk beside us for eternity. In Jesus' name, amen.